A very good afternoon to all. I am Diana from IK Academy, and I'm honored to have Encik Muhammad Nizam Muhammad Amin today here with me. And I'm also honored to have everyone that watching us in following us in Zoom. Okay, so on behalf of IK Academy, I would like to welcome all of you to our fourth IK Booster webinar series for today, with the topic of reviving production for Post MCO through data analysis and monitoring. Okay, so before we proceed with the session, I will read briefly about our speaker's profile today. So Encik Muhammad Nizam received his degree in electronics from the Tokyo University of Agriculture and Technology, appointed as technical advisor for semiconductor by Jabatan Tenaga Manusia under Ministry of Human Resource in September 2018. He has more than 15 years experience of consultation and coaching in the field of quality and process improvement, root cause analysis with AD, lean management, TPM, QCC, ISO 9001-2015, IATF 16949-2016. He is also involved in business research and business matching. So we are very delightful to have him with us today to share his experience and also knowledge for our topic. So Encik Muhammad Nizam will share his presentation for around 40 minutes like that, and we will try to finish our Q&A session in around 20 minutes like that. So should you have any question throughout this session, please feel free to post your question anytime at the Q&A button. So if let's say you have in mind the same question, the one that already posted, you can just push the like button, the thumbs up button, so the question will go up. So we will attend your question firstly at the end of the session later. So without further ado, I will pass the session to Encik Muhammad Nizam. Thank you. So I hope you enjoy the session. If you have any problem throughout the session, you can send the chat to all panelists also. Okay, thanks and bye-bye.
Okay, yeah, Assalamualaikum, good afternoon, and also konnichiwa. Thank you, Diana, for your introduction. As you know that we are in a very serious situation worldwide. We are in a lockdown in Tokyo. Tokyo is going through a very messy lockdown. Most things are stopping right now. But then on the other hand, a lot of people wants to jump in back into production as per normal mode. As you can see that in previous television announcement, the manufacturing of Malaysia President FAM, they say that could the government allow us to run as per normal. But unfortunately, on my experience and also on my understanding what is happening in the world right now, we are unable to run production as per normal without certain precautions that we need to take. Now, today, I would like to share with you some notes and some information that I have gathered throughout starting of the COVID-19, and also some that slides or also suggestions by some other major consultants like McKinsey on what we should do before we proceed with the production. Okay, my name is Nizam. I have been doing consultation in Japan, as what you can see in the slide now. Okay, and perhaps if you want to know more about me, we can do that later on in the separate session. Where is my slide? Not moving. Hold on. Okay. Now, reviving production for post MCO. Diana, is anybody looking at my slide changing? Why I can only see on my PC, but not on the slide.
Actually, you're not moving. And then even the slide also, supposedly you're already at next slide, right? Because I only can see the slide that you're showing just now, which is the lead course. Okay, now it's moving. So
I think
is it maybe of the internet?
Maybe it's the internet delay.
But your voice, I can still hear. It's okay. You just can continue.
All right. Okay, let's continue. Now, before we revive our production for the post MCO, we need to do a thorough data analysis, understanding what is happening surrounding us, and also what do we have within us before we embark into our production. Now, COVID-19 has a very serious chain effect on the manufacturing and supply chain. Now, let's look at the next slide. Now, as you can know, most manufacturers and also some of the clients are residing mainly in Asia, in Europe, and also in China. That's how big the consumer and the market is, okay? Now, if you can see at the bottom left of the slide, the largest dominant of the world economy, as what I've mentioned, the three areas, Asia, Europe, and North America. Now, let's look into the next slide. Now, this is what you can see, a data I gathered from our statistics department, Malaysia Statistics Department. And in Malaysia itself, the economic activity, 23% consists of manufacturing and 55% are the service industry. Now, service industry also includes things like transportation, logistics, tourists, and so forth. And this is the second contributor, GDP, to our economy, meaning that with the service industry almost paralyzed, manufacturing industry paralyzed, the country is losing about 70% of the total GDP that is enjoying until pre-COVID-19. I can see that in 2018 alone, Malaysia export parts and components for about 12.5 billion ringgit Malaysia. Now you can see that during the post-COVID-19, this is the graph showing us the index in the US stock indexes. You can see that it haven't dropped below to minus 30%. Even in Europe, it has become smaller to minus 40% growth. And also in Asia, it has gone through about minus 30%. Okay, this is a graph conducted by BSG assessment or BCG survey. Recently, they have found out that in Europe alone, the plants, 90% of the plants have been closed. In America, 65% of the plant has been closed. And as much of 19, a lot of Asian are starting to gear up to reopen their plant. That is maybe total about 80%. Now, the COVID-19 has forced each of the country manufacturers into a lockdown cycle. We have the pre-lockdown, we have the in-lockdown and post-lockdown. And you can see that each situation may be different, but somehow they are a bit similar. In the sense that because the business system or business network that we have in the current world is very complex. Now, what are the general impact that we have to the manufacturing activity? Now, before the COVID-19 becomes seriously affected worldwide, I've spoken to one of my clients in Tokyo. They are the largest air condition manufacturer, Daikin. They said that they can only survive up to a month before COVID-19, and that was in January. Now, the survey has showed that with the COVID-19 still under lockdown, people are looking at part shortages of 75%, and people are looking at workforce outages of 55%. You can see at later slide why this happened. Transportation disruption about 70%. We cannot deliver to our end customer because of shortages of logistic businesses, so about 22%. And the capacity of manufacturing itself has actually been underutilized due to all above reasons for about 32%. Now you can see it's red in color and orange in color, divided into a certain different industry. And you see that the highest is consumer good being affected. But on the other end, like high-tech industry, auto, and semiconductor, half of it, because they still have their buffer, as shown in the orange. But then, if the lockdown continues, basically, it will also become all red. Now, this is another slide showing to you how it is affected. Now, if you are in the industry of doing, for example, metal industry. For energy and for resources, you can see that the supply chain, the operation is more than 75% interrupted. For travel and also transportation, and also if you look at manufacturing, almost all the chain from personnel, operation, and revenue is badly affected or severely affected. Now, these are some of the recommendation that is being put up by a certain consultant, like this one is from Gartner. They say that the impact that we have is the continuity of operation, because most of our employees are stranded. It's just like in Malaysia, most people balik kampung or went back to hometown, and they are very uncertain when are the dates they can return. And you can see that recently a lot of Indonesian workers went back to their hometown in Indonesia. And with Indonesia going into a serious lockdown, we can't be sure when will they come back to Malaysia and support the industry in Malaysia. And also there will be a dramatic change in market demand. Since that during the lockdown, a lot of people will lose the ability to earn, meaning that wages cuts and so forth, and meaning that our strength or our ability, the purchase to power will go down as well. And also the confusion about lack of data coming from very sources, unverified sources, leading to ill information in decision making. For example, one part of the country, for example, the employers or the business owners saying that we should run, whereas on the other countries, the businesses are still under lockdown. So this information are very confusing to many people. Now, if you can see under this slide, this is the normal chain of how the things are flow. Now, in normal circumstances, you will see that the supplier would send directly all the products up to the maker and end user. And you can see that, sorry, this slide is in Japanese. You can see that the bottom side of the slide showing that there's a flow of money back to the maker, to the supplier, and so forth. But however, when under the lockdown of COVID-19, all of these people are not in operation. And thus, the flow of money, as I showed in the cartoon there, gomen nasai, mean we are very sorry, we can't pay you at this moment, and we have a problem, vice versa. Now, what are the losses that a lot of company faces? Okay, now these are the general losses to the manufacturers. First is the financial loss. Okay, a lot of SMBs will lose its part of liquidity because certain companies are requested to pay salary even during the shutdown. Even the government has given some incentives, but there's certain parts that the companies need to pay. Thus, in the long run, create a spending slowdown, or the purchasing power has been brought down tremendously. Now, a survey done by the Association of Manufacturers in Malaysia stated that 80% of Malaysians will be affected financially. And also, at the same time, the credits from the bank will be affected because banks will need to review back their credit credentials with their creditors and also their debtors. Now, on the operation side, we will see that loss of supply chain due to foreclosure of suppliers, either in domestic market or international market, thus creating a new supply chain bottlenecks, which at this moment, a lot of people do not see how extensive this will impact the whole chain in your operation. Now, second thing is the expiration of material. A lot of companies during shutdown would have a certain materials which would have expired date. For example, like in semicon industry, we use more compound which have an expiration date. You will see that some company will have material losses. Now, production total stop, whereby machine and a certain process needs to be stabilized before it can produce the quality as it perceived before the COVID-19. So again, there's a big question whether the machine and process would be unstable once we start our operation again. And of course, again, as I mentioned, the loss of logistics, because a certain route has yet to be in operational. You can see that certain companies, certain airlines have totally shut their operation. Now, in terms of organization, as I mentioned earlier, displacement of employees return home to hometown, okay, and thus create gaps, and thus also creating an opportunity, or we can say that to current business create a competition, because new competitors will emerge. For example, in Japan has actually, you will see that this in another slide, Japan has instructed their manufacturers to become fully automated, okay? And lastly also, the employee morale. Once the production has started up, I think most of the employees who return and for the first time meeting their friends, they will do a lot of chit-chatting, and productivity will also be affected. Also, as mentioned earlier, the purchasing power would be affected globally. Now, this is a study done by McKinsey and company. I just want to highlight a little bit here. They say that even though the capacity has been recovered 90%, but however, 80% of the staff are very new. Now, this is an interview conducted by McKinsey to some of the producers in China. They have 80% of the staffs are new, meaning that whatever parts that we are going to get in China, once we start our production, would have a serious case of quality, perhaps. Okay. Now, to those companies who wants to start production, the first thing they need to understand is, first, they need to understand of the future manufacturing. How are we going to expect? What are the scenarios? Because the scenarios are very unpredictable at this moment. Now, the impact would be, first, we are unsure about the long-term effect on the production due to the market changes. We are unable to predict the long-term fallout, okay? Whether the current products that we have would have tremendous impact. For example, change on customer moods, swing of technology. Can we become flexible? Can our machines be flexible? Now, again, manufacturing itself have to reset their priorities. For example, with the limited resources that most companies have at this moment, they will have to run not to full swing. Most probably they will run full swing, but with less people, okay? Now, they are also at risk of contracts that they are having right now. Recently, I heard in news, Malaysian news, stating that certain people are talking about, we need to fulfill the contracts that have been signed during pre-COVID. But in my serious opinion, they need to again negotiate with their clients whether their existing contracts must be reviewed or at a greater risk, okay? And the manufacturing itself has a spending limits at this moment. Also, I will show you two examples whereby a lot of MNCs are moving out from China, and thus their suppliers as well will be moving out from China. Now, if you can see that in March 23, just before COVID-19 has a serious impact, US government talking about moving out 70% of their smartphone production out of China. And in the most recent event, this is from Japan, on April 9, the Japanese government has set 243.5 billion to help all the Japanese firms, small and big, to shift their production out of China. They are talking about the high-tech products, the critical products should be produced in Japan, and the other smaller should relocate elsewhere outside China. Now, this is also going to disrupt the supply chain, okay? This is going to disrupt our Malaysian companies' involvement in the international supplies. Now, you look at this slide. This slide also, I just want to show you two key things as blue arrow. The balance service supply. Now, we need to pull forward the key inventory components. If car industry in certain parts of the world is started to run, for example, like Toyota, Mazda, they want to start their production. Now, we need to look what key balance that we have that we can supply and support. And also, we need to see a plan to handle the backlog, whether it is back to normal or whether it is a new norm. We need to see what backlogs and what are the critical future that we are going to face with our clients. Now, in the short-term matters, I want to give you your thoughts. You know, recently, Malaysian producers are talking about strategic production zones, where they say that those zones with green zones should be allowed to do production. Now, give a serious thought about this again. Even though we can produce, can we get our things exactly the way it should be to our clients overseas? Now, there is a suggestion from one of the work consultants talking about once the operation has started, the management of the company needs to relook again at their own operation. They need to operate as a nerve center, meaning they need to participate. The president of the company, the MD of the company needs to be transparency and do an agile business decision, okay, with the production members. And we need to ensure that there is no overproduction or over order by the client, because client may have panicked and they will start doing excessive order, but the outcome will be because we have to look at the consumer, whether the end consumer would be able to buy the products after the COVID-19, whether they have the money, as we talked earlier, right? So means we need to reshape back our demands to fit the supply to avoid unnecessary overproduction and over order. Now, we also need to assess the components, parts critical across the supply chain. We need to assess whether we are able to get the parts or the components, since that logistically the supply chain has been disrupted. For example, if you buy machines from China, since that China says that they have started production, whether you can access to that parts for your machine. If your machines are coming from US, now that is another issue, means that you may not be able to access to critical parts of your machine should your machine break down during your next operation. Okay, and I've mentioned many times the securing of the transportation route. Now, Malaysian has suggested that we should run about 50% to 100% capacity. Now, again, your thoughts, you may write down in the question that you can raise later, whether this should be it or not. Okay. Now, we need to conduct a full scenario analysis. This is not by me alone. I've checked with a certain worldwide consultant. They say that prior to running the production, we need to understand the total scenario. Scenario analysis would be very important before we start production. Now, if you look at this slide, this is the flow of the parts or components that supply to your production that we will see up to the client. But we can see that it is a very complicated flow, and you will see that there may be a bottleneck. For example, if you have a small SME, a small parts coming from overseas, you may need a longer lead time at the custom or immigration. I have ordered a part from China, just quite recent for my online training. I ordered a green screen. It has arrived in Malaysia. From China, it was very fast, but from Malaysia Logistics Center to my house, it's still in a question. I'm still waiting for about a week. So just imagine a bigger picture. in this step 1, if you don't understand the status condition of all your route of the suppliers and how it flows logistically, then you may have a problem once you start running. So you must understand this scenario first. Now, this is step 1. Now, the step 2 is actually engaging the scenario planning. Now, this is an example by McKinsey, and I think this is a very good example for all the manufacturers out there to adopt. Now, the first left right here, if you can see that this is under constrained demand with inflation, means this is a situation before COVID-19. This is pre-COVID-19. Now, once we want to run, we need to understand the consumption, the inventory that we have, and the delay risk as what is shown in step 1. Now, we need to minus out, as an example here, we put at minus 200. Okay. Traditionally, if we look at the data, maybe we have inflated a little bit more. Maybe we have done a little bit more on our inventory. So we need to take that out. And if you have the capability of doing regression model using computer analysis, maybe you need to further discount another 100. Now, if you go at commercial validation, where you look whether there is actually market for your products or the end customer's product, you need to minus out perhaps another 80 or 100. Now, if you're talking about demand reshaping, perhaps you have to give another discount of a minus 50. Now, as a total, you can see that most probably when you want to actually run the production, you will have less than 1,000 as per your pre-COVID situation. Now you may have about 570 only. That is almost half. So unlikely you are able to actually start 100%. So means you need to start from 50% first. And at this scenario here, you should be able also to do a stress test on your financial capability. The company can actually stand with this scenario. Can the company financially, for example, if the payment due to the current situation delayed by the clients, now you may have a very good paymaster will pay you almost immediately once you invoice them during pre-COVID. But in this situation right now, you may have people paying you a little bit later. Now, let's look in the next step, the issues that affecting production and how can we do that, because we are preparing for a new normal. Now, this is a scenario that you should be looking at in terms of people, your materials, your assets, your compliances with regulation, and how you can communicate with the suppliers such as now. Communication, I think a lot of people like us today, we are using Zoom for communication, but I think the rest, like people, materials, assets, and non-compliance is a big question. Like for example, like compliance, people are trying to rush things out. Like just now in the example given, in China, they say that 80% of the staff are new. So the compliance to your standards are also in questions. Now, impact when there's a long idling, as you can see that the current situation is not as 1 week holiday shutdown. It is not either like Malaysia have faced in 1992, where the whole nation has disruption of electricity because it affects only Malaysia. If Hari Raya, it will affect only a certain countries. But in COVID-19 pandemic, it affects the whole world. Means the idling of our process is not exactly the same as the normal SOP that we had prepared. Okay. For example, factory environment impact. For those companies with clean room facilities, you need time to actually have a stable particle count to achieve back your classroom standard. Or for example, those companies which running molding injection, running solar wave oven, they have also impact of process stability, which has relationship with their factory environment. Now for machine, some machine may need a longer time to achieve stability. For example, like pre-flow oven. I've worked with clients doing batteries for handphone. I think they will need a longer time to actually achieve back process stability, especially when chemical is heavily used in the process, because the certain shutdown during pre-COVID may also result a certain tooling parts are not being properly stored, mean there may be a lot of rust. Now, as I mentioned earlier also, material impact, expired material, supply chain is disrupted, you have insufficient stream of supply, you have high competitions of supply, maybe some small suppliers, they are foreclosure, they can't run. And another thing, pricing of the material may be different. Okay, they may be up due to the constraints in logistics facilities. Now, the human impact, after a long leave, there may be a sudden drop of skills. Okay, and worst scenario, we need to retrain our operators due to the long rest. Okay, and also, again, I have mentioned earlier, we have to run the operation with less people due to perhaps the financial constraint, or what we say OPEX constraint that we have. Now, these four things has a direct and indirect impact on the process itself, because as we all know, stability of the process, which is highly related to both of the materials input and the machine performance. And also the data collection stability is highly dependent on MSA, which is closely related to the product produced by the process and also the people who actually measuring the products during the process. So if you have a new operator, then it will affect your results. Now, this will actually affect our goals in having process stability, the quality that we want, the QTD, time to delivery, on-time delivery, OTD, and costing. So we need to release done after we have done the step one and the scenario analysis to do the next step, which I call post MCO production, to see how we can run the production with less manpower. Perhaps we have less people monitoring the data, and perhaps we may have a machine breakdown, but that we don't have the parts availability. Okay. Now, what are the data that we need to do or to check? Okay, these are the things that you need to do. Now, as you can see that we need to revive each process. By the first step and the second step that I have mentioned earlier in my previous slide, once we understand the scenario, we need to choose which process or which production, which is capable to run at a stable mode. That does include the operator itself. Now we have to see the condition of the machine. We need to condition back the machine to its normal glory. We can't run fast. We need to do a small run to check, and we need only the last step, which is ramping up the production itself. Now this is the second level of data analysis. Okay, the first one would be the situation of the logistic and the parts availability and the customer demand and so forth. Now, this is the second level of data that we need to look at. Now, the first one is once we have identified which machine, which process, which is most suitable and most stable to run, then we need to check this condition prior to run our first run. Okay, we need to check the key components and segment of the machine, whether the pneumatic of the machine is running properly, whether the sensors are correct, and so forth. Whether the machine parts should, if the machine breaks down in the middle, what are the critical parts that should be there? So now we need to refer back to our maintenance breakdown record so that we know the history of that machine. So we know what is needed for the machine to achieve its stability, right? So means we need to look at all our MTBF data, MTBR data, MTTR data, the critical components that has always been changed previously. What are the process stability? What were the CPK? What were the PPK of that process? And what were the output or takt time of cycle time of that process. And also, we need to study back or look back at the previous MSA results, okay? Because our objective is to get more stable machine, less problematic machine, and less operational costs for a machine of a process. Then only we can go to the next step. Now, once we have done and looked at the condition of the machine itself prior to COVID-19, then we should run sample or small lot to monitor the machine stability and process stability. But however, a lot of people missed out in conducting MSA again. Now, let me stress to you the importance of MSA. Now, without prior testing out your current GRNR, either its variable or attribute, then you will have a serious problem of data gathering during your initial run. Okay, so in my experience as a process engineer, it has always been warned and highlighted by our management those days that we should run a quick GRNR before we start a small run. Okay, now a lot of people may not be able to achieve this, but as a guideline, if you are currently having a proper MSA set up in your facility, your CPK should be at 1.67 so that your process will remain stable throughout the small run and after the ramping up exercise. Okay, and you'd have to ensure that the parts that being produced under the small run would have the QA acceptance to the standards of internal standard and also your customer standard. Now, when we run these small lots, we need to check the data, not only for QA, but we need to see whether there are also small breakdowns or small stoppages. That's what we say in Japanese, chokote, okay? Whether this exists or not. Another worst thing that when I was an engineer that we will try to find hard enough, almost failure situation. You see, almost failure situation, these are the situations are not well recorded under machine breakdowns. Under the machine breakdown records, only when the machine breakdowns, only the operator records it, okay? But we need to do and to understand also almost to fail scenario so that we understand whether we are going to have a smooth sailing after step 4. So we need to frequently do SPC monitoring for the process and also to see whether we need to have a special case on certain critical process, which previously the data shows that the process may be unstable. That was during normal production. Now, in this situation, we need to ensure that this is being monitored closely, okay? Now, during this small run, we need to compare these data with those data that we had during pre-COVID-19, okay? During step 4, we had the data, so we need to compare the data. Now, if this is acceptable, then we can go to step 5. If this is not acceptable, then we need to look at the scenario again, whether the scenario makes some sense or the data that we have in step 3 is insufficient to tell us the whole story. Now, once we have done that, you have to understand that all these small lot runs need to be specially handled and marked to ensure awareness to both internally and also your clients, okay? A lot of people presume that once it's acceptable, it will be all okay. But then under ISO 9001 criteria, okay, if you understand ISO 9001 carefully, it has to be properly marked under these circumstances, okay? Now, in step 5, once step 4 is fully satisfied, then only you can run the production as normal, but still you need to have a close monitor process, okay, and look at the quality. And at this time, your CPK should be hovering between 1.33 and 1.67, okay? Then it would deem that that process may be stable, okay? Now, if you have set a special case condition previously, then only you should take a deep breath and let the process run as per normal. Okay. And again, I'd like to emphasize, whatever you run in step 4 and step 5, the lot should be clearly identified and inform the client for close monitoring. Now, certain people will say that, hey, I don't have to tell a client. Yeah, it's your right, but if you look to your clients as partners, okay, and if you look your suppliers as partners, if you are a supplier and you look a client as partners, then you should work hand in hand. Okay. Now, an inclusion to my presentation, the restart should be as per SOP for long-term shutdown. However, during this pandemic situation, many factors have changed, and working in out of normal situation requires very special attention. Now, special attention means data. I've worked as an engineer since 1991 as a production manager, and as a trainer, I've seen that Malaysians, especially, or Asian countries in a whole, we are very weak at looking at data. We need to look data at all angles. Compare data with another data. For example, we can't just be looking data of a machine performance against a timeline, but we need to look data against timeline, against human, against parts changes, against material changes, and so forth. Then we will see the whole picture. This is, we are talking about looking data as a big data. Okay. Now, only closely monitored data and comparison data will make clear of our understanding and ensuring the process stability and the quality can be achieved. Now, preconditions, step 3 is very crucial. Okay. And under COVID-19 situation, we may not be able to get machine parts as in pre-COVID-19 situation. So we have to be very careful. And with this, I'd like to end my presentation for today. Thank you for listening to me. And if there are questions, you can raise the questions, and my colleague will let me know, and we see how much questions that we can answer today. And I wish you good luck in getting your production start, and hope that we can actually achieve back our normal situation as soon as possible. Thank you.
Encik Nizam, actually kita dah ada question. Encik Nizam perasan tak ada bawah tu yang ada Q&A tab.
Okay.
We have question. Boleh jumpa?
Okay. Right. Okay.
Boleh. Okay.
Alright. Question to Amin Hamzan. What do you think on psychological impact to workers for post-COVID-19 in terms of productivity and performance? Well, one thing I can say that the first day they come to production, you can't get their full attention. Okay. First, there will be a lot of talks. Secondly, there were people afraid of touching one another, and the considerations are not there psychologically. And a certain people would not want to go back to production mode. Okay. And we can see that a lot of families are asking the government to extend school holidays, right? And psychologically, I think this is something that far beyond that, even the government has actually launched the psychological call clinic or something, right? So we are going to have a problem with workers. Workers may not want to touch products. They will skip inspection of processes, okay? So that's the reason why I emphasize on doing MSA, both attribute and also variable, okay? Attribute, as MSA is talking about whether we have the concentration, full concentration, and whether we have gaps between the observation of operators when they are doing inspection. So psychological impact would be very hard on the workers. Now, next question, there's no name here. In my view, how much impact for a country that rely on agriculture during post-COVID-19? Now, if you look at Malaysia, I think today it's a viral again. A lot of people throwing out agriculture right in Malaysia. But for country that rely on agriculture, I think there will be a big gaps in countries that doesn't have enough food. So means export probability or chances would be higher. But however, again, the routes, the international routes would be disrupted. But within your country itself, in my personal opinion, I think food is what we need. And I think agriculture would sustain the livelihood of the people. Okay. Now, next question. Community will be seriously impacted, especially those working in manufacturing. Definitely some lost their job. My question, what could be done in 6 months during post-accounting to ensure communities secure their jobs and new roles? Now, a lot of companies, once that, a lot of companies are looking at online working situation. I think the only thing that we can't do offline is the operation side of the manufacturing. But the rest of other departments, maybe I think we will still be under online situation. People needs to adopt to it. And for those who actually lost their jobs, I think this is a turnaround whereby the new opportunities will come in. Okay, but the new opportunities will not rely just on within our country itself. It would be beyond our shores, meaning that they need to work out how they can explore other opportunities as well as what we are trying to do now, cross-border online training or webinar. Okay, I hope that I can answer you. But then I think my Japanese colleague in Japan right now also asking me, what about jobs in 6 months? Well, as we mentioned earlier, the biggest economics are these 3 nations. If these 3 nations are not able to have their stability in terms of economics, then we may have a problem. That's the reason why Asian countries should work out together. We should actually concentrate and doing things within. We have to be self-sustained within our Asian country. Then we will be less relying on the other economies. Okay. Now, what kind of next question from Lo? What kind of business costs should we cut during this session? First, once you have the scenario involved, I think first one is not to have the full force people working for you. That would be the first cut. Okay, you need to see whatever materials that you have first. Okay, then you see whether you should use that material first before you buy other materials. Okay, right? Then the other cost would be try to save energy as much as possible. That will help you. Okay, if you have able to do 3R in your factory, by all means do that out. So that will reduce the operational cost, because I think electricity, water in a certain manufacturing is a way high cost. Okay, should be seriously thinking into that. Now there's another question. Any suggestion for construction fee for startup after post COVID? I'm project manager. Okay. Now I think Malaysian government has taken quite well initiative to actually start up the construction field. Okay, I think you'll see the chain effect later on. I'm not sure which part of the construction you are looking at. If you're looking at the house construction, there will be a slowdown a little bit. Okay, before we were under lockdown, I've seen some construction manager driving as Grab. It's not very healthy. But I hope with the government initiative to start back the construction of the LRT2, MRT2, and so forth, that would be start up. I think you should look into that. Okay. From Basli, I'm working in construction company, contractor, to sustain the company without retrenchment. What we should do now? What you could do is, if you have a well experience, in my opinion, perhaps you could do a seminar, training seminar for construction workers. You know, there would be a new opportunities for construction company with good experiences. Okay, so we have seen less people doing videos for constructions area. We have people doing IT, we have doing digital marketing, but we have less people doing training video for construction company. Maybe we can try that. Okay. Now, what do you think from Banta? What do you think about other industries? how they will manage with the manpower pre-COVID-19. How about local industry? Will they grow more as countries try to shift local industry? Now, you should implement lean. Okay, lean system is one of the best tools to identify waste. In many companies that has actually adopted leans, they are able to run their processes better with less human or with less manpower. You should be looking at that. Not only apply to production, it applies to healthcare, it applies to construction. Do look into lean. I think this may help you. Okay, and also we need to be creative. We need to work outside the box. Try to create more innovative products. Okay, try to learn from the Japanese, as one Stone Mahade said. We can learn also from our counterpart in China. They have been very, very innovative, and that's the reason why they can become better and bigger even after any disaster. Okay, to answer No Azhar, to restart the operation and production, maintenance is very crucial to this part. What is the ideal time frame for maintenance to get everything back on track? Now, I agree with you, because as step 3 I mentioned, we need to do reconditioning of the machine. So within a week, the maintenance should be up and running and test the machine. Okay. If 2 weeks, it will be too long, because I have myself experienced last time. My boss gave me to start back a process within 24 hours. Okay, but then it needs full commitment. But just now, if you can see from other people, question is psychological impact is very high. You need to bring only personnel which can do full 100% concentration, no handphone. If they start bringing handphone into the production place while they are doing reconditioning of the machine, then you're going to have trouble, right? So first, no distraction, right? Now, how much do policies of a country need to be navigated under COVID-19? Wow, that is a very tough one. I'm not a policy maker, but you can see that in many, many countries, the policies are much different approach, okay? But in general, they try to help all the small industries, all the SMEs. In Japan, for example, everybody is given 30,000 yen. Okay, that's about 1,000 ringgit Malaysia. Without question asked, you only need to register and publish that you have no work. Okay, unlike Malaysia, we have so many categories. So basically, a lot of government out there is trying to ensure the SMEs, everything is running back as per normal, right? And do you think from why more factories will go for manufacturing automation after COVID-19? Yes, I think a lot of companies are going for automation. I think in Malaysia, we may not be able to do a full automation because maybe financial constraint, but we need to look at least semi-auto, because of otherwise we would not be able to compete in terms of production quantity and also quality, right? Now from Shukri, currently Malaysia government released certain company to continue their operation like manufacturing automotives, look like CBU operator. What happened to CKD? Now I think this is part by part released from the government, because Mazda, Toyota, Subaru, Hyundai, all the car manufacturers, if you browse the internet, you see that they are about to start back their operation. I think by releasing the CVO operation, it would help to sustain these clients, and the CKD would definitely come in at later on. Okay, I'm very sure it will come in because the car industry is pushing that, and I don't think that only CBU would be. Once CBU is exhausted, I think the CKD will start in operation. Okay, I think there is no more question, right?
Yes, as of now, we don't have any more questions. From the floor, do you still have any more questions before we end our session for today? So we wait maybe another 10 seconds. If let's say don't have, then I guess we can finish our session. Okay,
Okay.
I believe we don't have, yeah, do you have anything you wanted to add to them before we end our session, Chinizam?
Okay. What's one thing? I think a lot of people are scared about the psychological impact as well. Learn to try to be very focused. Okay. I was taught by Professor Engku Aziz last time that Asian, especially Malaysian, we are not very focused. Okay, we don't have the small rooms inside our brain. Okay, but many people like Japanese, even people in China, they are very focused and dedicated. I think we need to do that. Okay, we need to learn how to be not distracted by this. I think a lot of Japanese company, Korean companies that we have worked with during our last training session, this is the biggest culprit, handphone. I think all manufacturing companies in Malaysia, whether they are small or big, they need to be very strong in their policies. In the new policies, don't allow handphone. I think then we will change our method of thinking. And also, remove the bad apples. I think this is the best time, even though I don't like to mention it. We need to have good apples in our team. Okay, so if we have the opportunity to bring up the good apple first, bring them first. Okay, don't bring all the jokers around because that will affect our concentration. Thank you everybody for listening. And if you want the slides, you want anything else, I think
Nanti
questions
saya akan
you can
bagi tahu
ask.
di
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So I hand
So,
to Diana. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Encik Nizam. So I guess we have come to the end of our session for today. Thank you, Encik Nizam, one more time. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. So if you are interested to receive the slides and also the recording of the session today, please send PM your email address, private message in Facebook page. Our Facebook page name is IK Academy. So you look for IK Academy Facebook page, yeah. And also, please don't forget to leave a comment in Facebook, and don't forget to like, follow us in our page in LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to get latest news for our upcoming IK Booster webinar series. I really hope that I can see all of you again. In fact, we will be having our next IK Booster webinar this coming Thursday, 16th of April at 2 p.m. with the topic of electrical risk audit, challenges to opportunities. So please check our page for more details. Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy. Have a nice day ahead. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.